As Brian said, my name is Bruce Powell. I'm the Vice President of the Loyola Blakefield Alumni Association. I got out of this school in 1984, and I love it. I've been back many times, and I've stayed involved. My father was class of 1961. Many uncles and cousins preceded me here, and I currently have 3 boys here. I have a sophomore, class of 2022, a class of 2024, my 8th grader, and class of 2026, my 6th grader. And I'm not going to be retiring anytime soon. Okay? But I want to start off by welcoming everybody here to this event. This is a really prestigious award, and it's a wonderful event. I look forward to it every year, and I'm privileged to be able to speak to you at it this year. So welcome to all of our guests, our faculty and administration that are here, and of course our prior recipients of this prestigious award. And welcome to the class of 2020. One of my favorite parts of the event is having the seniors here for this event. So seniors, in just a few weeks, you're going to walk across that hollow in your white coat and your bow tie, and you're going to get that diploma, and they're going to tell you, okay, they're going to say, go out, young man, and set the world on fire. And we're not talking about arson when we say that. We don't encourage felonies here at Blakefield. What we're talking about is taking that good, strong education that you received here and making the most of it and being a success, okay, going out and helping people. And that's the other part of it. So when you graduate from here, you're not just going to go out and use that education to leverage it into being a success in the business world or whatever profession you choose, but you've got to remember the other Jesuit motto, the ethos of being a man for others, okay? To those who've received much, much is expected. And when you go out in the world, you'll make your money, you'll have your successes, but don't forget to reach back and help those who are in need of some help, a helping hand up. I know through your service commitments here at Loyola, you've done things like working at the soup kitchens, at Beans and Bread. You've gone to help those in the inner cities in Baltimore and help the elderly and the cognitively disabled. Remember those values that were instilled in you when you leave here and give back. Give back to the community and be a man for others. And have a good time in college, too, though, on the first part. Seriously. Anybody want to take me with you? No? No. My wife wouldn't let me go anyway. But that brings me to the reason we're here, for the Kelley Medal Award. And Mr. Plunkett, a few minutes ago, told you what the criteria are. And the award's been awarded since the early 1960s to outstanding alum. In fact, it's the highest award you can receive as an alumnus here at Loyola Blakefield. And the criteria, briefly, I know that Brian went through them a minute ago, is 1 is distinction, showing distinction in your business or chosen profession, okay? But 2, and that's the set the world on fire part that I talked about a minute ago, all right? But the second criteria for this award is to serve as a role model for students and alumni through your personal, family, and public life. And that's the man for others part of it. So this really encompasses, this medal encompasses someone that shows all of these attributes, this ethos of the Jesuit education you've received here. Go out and use that education, but also remember to help others on the way. All right, guys? So that's why I can tell you this year's recipient of the award not only meets the criteria, but exceeds the criteria for this award. He is truly... He has truly dedicated his life to being a man for others. Ralph Moore is a West Baltimore native who was educated by the Oblate Sisters of Providence that were founded by Mother Mary Lang many, many years ago as the first African-American sisterhood. And their mission was to educate. At first it was African-American girls or girls of African descent back in the day, but now, you know, St. Francis Academy, you know, the football team and the basketball team over there, they're doing very well, and that's great. She helped found that school. She founded that school many years ago, and I'll come back to Mother Mary Lang in a minute in a story about Ralph, okay? But Ralph came to Loyola High School in the 60s at a time when there weren't very many students that looked like him. There weren't very many African-American students here. So he was sort of a fish out of water with a small group of guys trying to make it. He was instrumental in forming the first black student union here at Loyola Blakefield, okay? And after he graduated from here and went to Johns Hopkins, he came back to teach at the school. So Ralph did come back, and he's come back again and again to help at the school. And I know he's a very proud alumnus of the school because every time I see him, except for today, he's got the Loyola Blakefield baseball hat on. Okay, even in pictures, so I know it's not just here on campus. He lives it out. And after he, and I can tell you also about his time, and Brian Plunkett told you how much Ralph affected him. And I know through the letters that came in support of his candidacy for this award that he touched many other students' lives in his time here at Blakefield. Then when he went on from Blakefield, he continued to lead by example in being a man for others. He's been an advocate throughout his life for social justice, education, fair housing, and nonviolence. Along the way, he's worked for places like St. Ambrose, which works on having good housing for those in need. Okay, it's a big problem in Baltimore. I've worked my entire career in that area, and I can tell you that's a big problem. He worked with St. Ambrose, worked with St. Francis Academy, again, back to the Oblate sisters, right? And he also worked for Restoration Gardens and BCCC, as we say in the city, Baltimore City Community College. So he's always been serving. Always been serving. He's been on many boards over his career, advocating on behalf of our city's most marginalized citizens, for better public transportation, for peaceful conflict resolution, so important in our city. And coming back to Loyola, just a few years back, Ralph and some other alums got together and created the Frank Fischer Diversity School Fund, helping to raise funds to establish a scholarship for minority students here at Blakefield, so more children can come here who otherwise not be able to afford to. And that's a wonderful thing. I can tell you, being involved with the Loyola Blakefield Alumni Association, when we saw how much money these guys raised in a few short years, it's impressive, very impressive. Good job. I can also tell you that Ralph's grandson, Xander, is here, and I know Xander's going to be class of 2034. Is that correct? 2030. All right, Xander. Yeah. Love it. All right. So Ralph not only left Blakefield and set the world on fire, he certainly did, but he also always remembered and lived out the ethos of being a man for others. And that's why this year it is my honor and my privilege to present to Ralph Moore, class of 1970, the Loyola Blakefield Alumni Association's Kelley Medal. Can I put it on your head for you? It looks good on you, man. Thank you. Thank you.
If I had to give a title to my few brief remarks, and it's not that many, but they're in a larger type size and double-spaced. If I had to give a title, I'd call it Taking the Long Way from Mosier Street to Chestnut Avenue. Taking the long way. Once the road not allowed, but now a vista still opening. Thank you all for coming to breakfast this morning and for witnessing my receipt of the Kelley Medal. It is quite an honor to be a recipient, especially in this, the 50th year since graduating from Loyola High School, now Loyola Blakefield. Thank all of you who made this award possible. Stan Mosley, class of 75, and Wesley Wood, class of 88, my brothers on the Loyola Blakefield Alumni Association, and Mark Connor, class of 77. Where's Mark? There he is. My former student and brother who nominated me. Thank you to the Loyola Blakefield Alumni Association itself for the acknowledgement. Thanks to my wonderful wife, Baltimore City Solicitor Dana Moore. She is the daughter of the late Lieutenant General Frank E. Peterson, the first African-American pilot and the first African-American general in the U.S. Marines. And bear in mind, and she married a pacifist. So bear in mind that the Marines were the last of the military branches to integrate. Truman issued his executive order in 1948, and in 1950 they got around to integrating the Marines. But Dana herself made history last week by becoming the very first female Baltimore City solicitor. She's the first female to run the city's law department in Baltimore City history. So that's how she started Women's History Month, as we all do. She and my classmate Joe Smith from the class of 70, where's Joe? There he is. One of my best friends, whose father, Joseph Smith Sr., received this medal, and others helped to carry out their secret mission to get me here. And it is not that I am ungrateful, it's just that I find the attention from accepting an award a little awkward in receiving it. I evaluate my life by remembering where I came from. The two-story, second-floor apartment at 1002 West Mosier Street in Sandtown that I shared with my mother, father, seven brothers and sisters, Mari, Salvin, Tony, John, Aaron, Michelle, and Emily, and 2 dogs. I took a bus across the street, the number 30, that wended its way through the inner city and Bolton Hill until finding its way to Charles Street and North Avenue. In my coat and tie, I boarded the bus with a $1 bill my mother gave me each morning for transportation to school. The bus driver had a change-making machine easily within his reach, but refused to give me change so I could pay the 35-cent fare. Awkwardly, I stood at the fare box wondering, do I just sit down or do I stand there and wait for his attention? I waited, and just before we'd arrive at the number 11 stop at North and Charles, he'd unhappily give me change. And he would do the same thing the next day and the next, while politely greeting and serving the white guest who boarded. What is the lesson from that episode? Don't give up. That's my lesson to you seniors. Don't give up. Eventually, after months perhaps, he started giving me change upon request. My guess is that someone who witnessed my ordeal reported him. My mother asked me if I wanted to stop going to Loyola. I said no, and here we are. I was recruited to Loyola by a really cool guy named Father Frank Fischer. I call him a Fisher of men. All right, Frank, here we are. He came to St. Pius V in Harlem Park, scouted us, and brought Vic Thomas and me to Loyola in the summer of 1966 for a math enrichment class before we started in our freshman year in September. He says he was inspired by Martin Luther King at the March on Washington in 1963. After leaving King, he decided to figure out how to do something about racial integration as he returned home from the National Mall. It took courage to do what he and the Jesuits did. There was a chance the Blake family would have been upset when Ken Montague applied. Is Ken here? Was admitted, and afterwards when the Jesuits created the Carroll Scholarship Fund in atonement. Frank was courageous to move around in the heart of the city in those days. He was nervous, he once told me, but he persisted. He was a father figure to so many black boys he brought so far from home. He was not alone. Other great Jesuits here then were Father Bill Waters, Brother Paul Cawthorn, Fathers Jack Martinez and Lucian Longton. Anybody remember Jack Martinez? Math, right? And Lucian taught us religion. I just spoke to Lucian last week over the phone. Fathers Charlie Costello, who was the president of the high school when we were here. Jack Burns taught chemistry. And Leo Murray. And there were others, of course. Father Bill Waters helped us start the Black Student Union in 1969 at a Jesuit retreat called Bellarmine Hall of Blue Ridge Summit. Paul Cawthorn moderated the BSU after Frank and Bill left and until I got here. He also started the cross-country team for those who could run competitively, I guess, right? These men were kind and courageous, as well as committed to quality education, diversity, and racial justice. Some of us walked on a picket line with Jack Martinez against housing blockbusters and speculators in Baltimore. Then my close friend, Judge Bill Jackson, there's Bill there, who was at St. Pius with me. I met him when he was in 3rd grade and I was in 4th grade, and I taught him how to use a buffing machine. That's how we met Frank Fischer, because we were buffing the chapel at St. Pius when Frank came in to say his prayer, his office, I think they call it, right? And I like to think in my private moments that if I hadn't taught Bill how to use that buffing machine, he wouldn't be on the bench today. The skills that he developed from and of course I was trying to work my way out of a job, but once I could teach you, the sisters would let me. Anyway, Bill Jackson, Wardell Porter, and I did community organizing work with my former Loyola math teacher, Father Jack Martinez, in Buffalo, New York, in the summer of 1974, the year I graduated from college. What helped us get through the different place Loyola High School was for most of us were these men ready and willing to support us. We were ghetto boys, and they accepted us for who we were, Loyola Dons and African Americans at the same time. We wanted to wear afros, they supported us. We wanted black history and literature in the curriculum. They helped us with that too. And we wanted Loyola to hire a black teacher and to be able to organize a black student union. And they got those things to happen. Diversity doesn't just happen on its own. You've got to get it started, and then you've got to keep it going. Diversity is not an event, it is a process. That's another lesson I learned here. We black students were called before the faculty from time to time to discuss our experiences at Loyola High. Discussion back and forth is very important too. For the past couple of years, the African American alumni and the Blakefield administration, headed by President Anthony Day, where's Anthony? Back there. Principal John Marinacci, and board chairs Bill McCarthy and Brian Hartman. Where's Brian? Is he here? Okay. Have been in dialogue about race matters at Blakefield. Again, integration is a process, which means we've made some progress, but we have a ways to go. I made some lifelong friends when I was a student. Before Eric March and I were in the same homeroom for 4 years and became lifelong best friends, Vic and I met a fellow from Medfield near Poly High School named Michael Corliss in our summer math class. Somehow, he stuck with the black guys in the class through our 4 years. Some at the school didn't like seeing him hang out with us, but he didn't care, and we welcomed him. We are still the best of friends 50 years later, although he lives in Wisconsin now with his marvelous wife, Ronnie, and their 2 sons. It took some courage for Mike, or Mick, to be our friend. He visited us in our neighborhoods and invited us over to his, sometimes for dinner, with his parents and his 2 sisters. My wife and I just had lunch with Mick and his wife, I guess maybe a month ago. He came to town. In our early days of our freshman year, Joe Smith, he doesn't remember, helped me open my locker, combination locker in St. Mary's Hall a few times. As we changed class and I needed to get another book or my lunch, Joe, my classmate from 1C, patiently opened my locker for me. We were friendly back then, but our friendship started growing years after we left, and we are the best of friends now. He and his terrific wife, Anne, have supported the Noel Raget Peace Camp project for years, and I've called upon his accounting expertise to help me understand the balance sheets generated by our fiscal sponsor, Strong City, Baltimore. Now, incidentally, the Noel Raget Peace Camp is named after Noel Raget. She's seated right there. She was a Jesuit volunteer with me at St. Francis in 2006, 2007, and she's never left. She's never left. Incidentally, one of my daughters is here. I have 2, Zara, and Nia Salima is right there. Stand up, Nia, for a minute. Nia is the mother of Selena Camille Christian, who performed in the play The Lion King over the weekend. She starred as Scar. Scar has traditionally been a male part. She insisted that she could do it, and she did 4 performances of The Lion King, and she was sensational. You were there. It was great. But I like that she challenged the tradition. Joe was there. Joe brought his whole grandkids and his wife and everybody. And my sister was there. Anyway, so Eric March and I went to the same college and graduated from JHU together. We have been friends and brothers, too, exercising at his health club downtown before stopping by the donut shop on the way home. That's a standard joke, but it's true. We did stop by. We said bagels, but it was actually donuts. Sweet bagels, right? And standing best man at each other's wedding. My wife mentioned to him last week that I was feeling a little under the weather, and he called immediately, the next day, to ask me my coffin size. I'm more of a future customer to him these days. Bob Letchin, Bob Lembach, Frank Bosley, Mike Roach, Larry Huber, Lou Mayer, Mitch Crook, Rick Schultz, John Taylor, Denny Narango, Nick Morocco, Joe Smith, Eric, and I might have forgot somebody, but we've met up at homecoming here the night before Thanksgiving many years. Here we are, 50 years, man, 50 years. While here, with the help of the Jesuits, the African-American students got a quality education and gave a good education to Loyola about being black and Loyola Dons at the same time. Some of my friendships and relationships from Loyola have lasted a lifetime. My special treasures have been with the African-American brothers I struggled in league with and the students I taught who remained in touch almost 50 years later. Since I never joined the military, I never had Army or Navy buddies. And because I don't belong to a fraternity in college, I didn't belong to a fraternity in college, I don't belong to a lifelong association except the Loyola African American Alumni from the BSU we started 51 years ago. Bill Waters had heard of such an organization in Philadelphia about the time. Vic Thomas and I were informed of the idea by a fellow named Ibn in an African-American bookstore on Pennsylvania Avenue in inner-city Upton. In 1969, the start of the senior year for the class of 1970, Bill arranged for the brothers to go up to the summit and get organized. Frank Fischer, Bill Michelman, Paul Cawthorn, and Lucian Longton may have been there. We talked, we worked, and we officially became an enlightenment and support organization. For those brothers who sat together in the cafeteria, I have maintained strong friendships and much brotherly love for the men of those years and for many brothers I taught, for whom I've met along the way. We are still meeting, talking, working together, and loving each other while teasing and praising one another in heavy doses. They are the buddies of my life. Please stand and say your names. Well, you've said your names, but brothers, if you're part of the Black Student Union, please stand for a moment. Thank you. Some of the men I taught while I was on the faculty of Loyola High reconnected with me once I left and have remained in touch. I recruited several of them to mentor returning students when I ran a reentry program for them. For the students, huh? Returning citizens, I'm sorry. That's what it is. Joe Connor and Mark Connor, not related, were the first people I recruited to be mentors for returning citizens. Ex-offenders, some people call them. Even though I had hit them both up already to help Noel and me with Peace Camp. Then Rich Rector, Frank Gallagher, where's Frank? Did he leave? Oh, there he is. And Jim Wider, all very successful lawyers, volunteered. Gallagher eventually chaired the board of directors at St. Francis Academy. You've never forgiven me for that, have you? Where I ran the community center for 10 years. He helped us through difficult times. Thank you, Frank. Andrew Gendron and his wife, whom I taught, and you were the class of 78, right, Andy? Sent my grandson a toy truck, and that yellow bulldozer is one of his prized possessions. Marvin Campbell, Gary Colbert, Keith Bailey, John Stanley, Tony Guy, and Bernie Bowers, the current diversity director at Loyola, have all stayed in touch. Any guys who I taught while I was here, if you were a student when I taught here for the 2 years I was here, please stand up for a second. Anybody? Frank's partners in change were fathers Bill Waters, Jack Martinez, Lucian Longton, and Brother Cawthorn. Bill Waters has been outstanding. He has contributed to quality education for so many with his creation of the St. Ignatius Academy, the middle school, Cristo Rey Jesuit High School, and then the Loyola Early Learning Center. Bill is now working on creating, is this a secret? An elementary school, it isn't anymore, grades K to 5. He is creative, tenacious, and simply an unsung hero in Baltimore. Bill was my teacher, then my co-worker, then a partner in justice work, my hero and my friend. But enough about Jesuits. Just kidding. Far and away, my favorite lay teacher while here at Loyola was my history teacher, Mr. Joseph Mitchell. Joe taught us American history, and once we demanded or requested that African American history be taught, Joe stepped up to do it. Does anybody remember Joe Mitchell? Yeah, great man. I still stay in touch with him, and he's been a contributor to the Peace Camp. It took some courage for him to do it because out in the community in those days, a question was raised, can a white man teach black history? I don't know if anybody remembers, but that was a discussion and debate in those days. Some said an emphatic no way, and some said yes. Joe said yes and did a great job. He introduced me to my historian hero, John Hope Franklin, who wrote From Slavery to Freedom. And I suspect it was Fischer and Joe's idea to hire me to teach social studies at Loyola. And I became the first African American alumnus the school hired. Now, I made it tough for the guys coming behind me, but it might have been the Malcolm X day that we had. Thank you, Joe, and thank you to his marvelous wife, Helen, who have supported the Peace Camp, as have Ann and Joe, Rick DeTore, Mark Connor and Joe Connor, Frank Gallagher, Marvin Campbell, Eric March, Carl Stokes, and my friend Mary Catherine Bunting. My wife has also been a big supporter, and a host of others. I'm almost done. A couple of more days, we'll be out of here. But enough about benefactors. There are three things I wanted to share with the students that I realized from my experiences with the Jesuits and Loyola High School. One, as I've already told you, do not ever give up. Don't ever. As I said on the first day I started to school, the transit bus driver tried to stop me. He refused to give me change so I could pay the 35-cent fare. He just ignored me, speaking only to the white bus riders. He would eventually give me change while I stood next to the fare box. If I had just sat down, he might have had me arrested. I don't know. My bus experience was exactly 11 years after Rosa Parks did her thing on the Montgomery buses. I guess the bus driver hadn't gotten the memo. My point is, if I had given up, I would not have had a wonderful Loyola experience. My mother asked if I wanted to go to Poly, and I said no. I was determined not to give up. Number two, to the African American students, feel free to be a Loyola Don and an African American at the same time. This is sort of my theme as I keep on, but reconcile that. Understand that you can be both. You don't have to pick one over the other. Be yourself. We struggled to get the school to let us wear afros. We wanted a black teacher and black literature and history taught as part of the school's curriculum. We wanted to organize, well, I said all that stuff already. To the white students, learn in the classroom and learn from other students, especially those who don't look like you, black and brown. Everybody should be teaching and learning so we can get to know one another. Bear in mind that because of the lopsided media, culture, and society we live in, persons of color know more about whites than whites know about us. But everybody needs to teach and learn. Frank Fischer was trying to create that type of environment regarding race on this campus. Number three, finally, expect faculty and administrators here to be advocates and role models. I saw Jesuits in the classroom and on the picket lines downtown against housing exploitation by blockbusters and speculators. The Jesuits introduced me to my eventual role models, Walter P. Carter and Sampson Green. They were two activist civil rights leaders in the city for racial justice and fair housing. I watched them and channeled them in my understanding and responses to issues. Walter Carter and Sampson Green showed me how to be a black man in society with the background music from that era coming from the likes of James Brown and Aretha Franklin. James Brown, you might recall, in my senior years, sang, "Ugh, with your bad self. Say it loud. I'm black and I'm proud." What? I haven't gotten to Aretha yet. No. I don't dance for free. I don't dance for free. No. Okay. See, I can do a little moonwalk if you want. And R-E-S-P-E-C-T. Find out what it means to me. R-E-S-P-E-C-T. Sock it to me. Okay. But that was the background, and you know, I tell people that I was influenced by the 3 M's: in terms of my commitment to peace and against war. Yes, sir. One was I was influenced by Martin Luther King's statement against the war in Vietnam on April 4th, 1967. He was very courageous. He spoke out against the war. Everybody told him not to, but he did nonetheless. And exactly 1 year later, April 4th, 1968, he was assassinated. So Martin Luther King. In October of 1967, Muhammad Ali refused induction into the military. You might remember that. I met Ali in the airport in Chicago a few years ago and made the mistake of speaking to his wife, and I think he almost punched me out. The third thing was Motown music. That Motown music was doing things like war, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. And people all over the world, they sang in Ball of Confusion, which was a Temptation song in our senior year. People all over the world they sang are shouting, "End the war." Bring the Boys Home is what Freda Payne sang. Anyway, this was a part of the music and the part of the culture. Finally, fully enjoy, seniors, your Loyola Blakefield experience. You will make lifelong friends, and your family will always be proud of you. And even more than all of that, remember that the end goal of this quality education you are getting is service to others. That's what the Jesuits taught. And I hope they're saying that loudly and clearly for you now. Nawal Raja, the brilliant and kind co-founding director of Peace Camp, named for her, is here. Feel free to volunteer to help us fundraise with an annual basketball game or something if you want. Finally, Loyola was founded by the Jesuits in 1852, exactly 100 years before most of us members of the class of 1970 at Blakefield were born. We were most born in 1952. Loyola was started exactly 100 years earlier. They must have seen us all coming, huh? Anyway, good for us. Thank you for listening, and peace.